Hey, I'm Markia. Want to hear something scary?
Yuki Onna. In the wilderness of Japan, something sinister stalks the unlucky travelers that stray too far from their paths. Very few survive their encounters with the deadly, spellbinding snow witch of legend, Yuki Onna. Many years ago, in a village in Japan, there was a young man named Minokichi who owned an inn with his father Masaku. On the way back from a trip one winter day, there was a freak blizzard. Father and son sought refuge in a small hut in the wilderness that hunters used. Finding little firewood, they prepared a modest fire to keep warm through the night. In the middle of the night, Minokichi suddenly awoke to snowflakes falling upon his face. The world was quiet and still. Hearing a sound to his left, he turned and saw the most beautiful woman he had ever seen kneeling next to his father. He watched as her eyes burned with an unnatural wintry fire. She reached out to touch his father, and suddenly he shot awake, gasping and shivering. Minokichi witnessed his father's skin turn a pale blue, and then white as the woman's icy embrace removed any trace of warmth from his body. With a final raspy breath, his father died. It all happened so quickly, and before he could react, the beautiful woman was beside him. Minokichi shivered as he felt her cold breath, just as cold as the snowflakes feathering across his skin.
I am Yuki Onna,
the woman whispered.
I am the Snow Witch. I was going to take your warmth and life as I have your father's, but I will spare you that because you are so handsome. Never speak of this day, or you will meet a fate worse than you could ever imagine. Swear on all you hold dear you will not break your vow.
Looking over at his dead father, Masaku, Minokichi swore to keep her existence a secret. The Snow Witch then turned and disappeared, and with her, the winter storm stopped just as suddenly as it had started. Minokichi returned to his village and his life. His father was mourned as one of the few casualties of winter that year, and life moved on. The seasons changed many times, and finally, the man one day met a beautiful young lady named Oyuki. Her beauty rivaled the Snow Witch that he encountered so long ago in the woods, and he offered her work at his family's inn. Together, they ran the inn and were soon happily married. Eventually, they were joined by 6 children, and Oyuki's beauty never faded as the years went by. On a family trip, Minokichi and Oyuki were caught in a violent snowstorm with their children. Minokichi thought back to the night he lost his father. He had begun to doubt his encounter in the woods, chalking it up to being half awake and too cold. He never did tell anyone, but there was something about this night and his children's eagerness for a story by the fire. Secure within their cabin and too confident in his long years, Minokichi leaned in close and asked his children if they wanted to know about the Snow Witch and what really happened to their grandfather all those years ago. The children quivered in fear as he told the story, but he assured them that they were all very safe here in the cabin together. Asking for their mother, who was preparing supper, the family went into the kitchen to look for Oyuki, but she was nowhere to be found. Returning to the main room, the children began to shiver. The room was icy cold despite the raging fire. Minokichi scanned the room, looking for an open window or door, some source for the sudden cold. His heart sank, and a fear he had not felt in years rushed back into him as his eyes fell on the long-haired woman in the corner, facing away from them. The children cowered behind their father as he shouted, "Who are you? Leave this house at once!"
I told you to not tell a soul,
the figure whispered.
You made a vow.
Oyuki turned to face her family as magic shimmered around her, and her earthly beauty gave way to the ethereal beauty of Yuki Onna, the Snow Witch. Speaking to her children, she explained,
Your grandfather gave his warmth and life to quell a blizzard just like this one. Without his sacrifice, many would have died.
She then turned her attention back to Minokichi and sadly said,
You broke your vow. Do you remember what you swore on?
The children's voices had fallen quiet. Minokichi turned to them and cried out as he realized that each of his children had turned into snow versions of themselves, frozen and perfectly shaped in their huddled positions behind him. Minokichi turned back to Yukiona, pleading that they be restored to take his warmth instead. Yukiona shook her head.
I cannot. Once you broke your vow, you also broke the spell. They are what I am.
At those words, the shutters and doors blew open, pouring the wind and storm into the cabin. After he ran and quickly closed them all, Minokichi discovered the cabin to be empty. His children and his wife, the Snow Witch, nowhere to be found. All he held dear was now gone. The village had much to whisper about Minokichi after that. They say there are many tales about his adventures as he sold his family's inn and began searching for his family among the snowy wilderness. However, he never returned to the village ever again.
One night when I was 16, I spent the night at a friend's house. Neither of us had tried Bloody Mary before, and we decided that tonight was the night that we would. If you've somehow managed to miss that part of your childhood, Bloody Mary is the urban legend that claims if you stand in front of a mirror in the dark, spin around and chant Bloody Mary 3 times, she will appear in the mirror and claw your face. So, my friend and I went into the bathroom, turned off the lights, lit some candles, and spun around, chanting, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. We opened our eyes, and there, in the mirror, was a head so covered in blood that it was just completely red. We screamed and ran out of the bathroom and never went back in the rest of the night. When it was time for bed, my friend's father came in to tell us goodnight. Hey girls, he said, are any of you on your period by any chance? No. Why do you ask? Oh, okay, well, there's blood on the bathroom floor, so I'd like you to clean it up when you get a chance, please. The Philippines is full of incredible mythology and fantastic creatures. My grandpa has always been a believer of these myths. That's because he's experienced them. This is what he told me. I lived in a rural town in the Visayan Islands of the Philippines. I was in my mid-20s and working late one night. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when I began to walk my way to the bus station, my way lit only by the full moon. I've walked this path many times. I passed by this house that had a dog in the yard that would always bark at me when I passed. But tonight, it just stared and just watched as I walked by. And that's when I heard it, a very strange sound in the distance. I had heard of the tikwi, sometimes known as a wak-wak or aswang. It separates from the lower half of its body to fly around at night, searching for any living soul, to rip out their hearts with their taloned feet and feast. And when you hear its call, you know it's hungry. So I continued walking towards the bus station, and I could still faintly hear the sound. And I saw that there was a security booth with a guard inside. I didn't want to wait at the station alone, so I slipped inside the booth and waited with the guard. I still wasn't sure if I was imagining this sound, but from the look on the guard's face, I'm pretty sure he heard it too. So we both just sat there, motionless. Finally, the bus arrived and I ran out of the booth and onto the bus and rode all the way home, the sounds of the tikwi growing fainter and fainter. The next day, I told my coworkers what had happened, and that's when one of them told me, tikwis are master tricksters. The further away they sound, the closer they are. This is a story that was passed around a lot when I was younger, and it still gives me chills to this day. Let me tell you about the man who was a little too curious. I was driving home from a business trip and decided to stay the night in a motel that I found on the roadside. After checking in, I walked down the hall to my room, but on my way I noticed a door that was all boarded up and covered in police tape. As soon as I passed it, I could have sworn I heard someone singing from inside the room. There was one spot of the door that was still uncovered, a giant keyhole, big enough to see through to the inside. So I knelt down and peeked inside the hole. All I saw was this pale little girl singing to herself. It was so strange. Why was she there by herself? Anyways, I stood up and went to my room and went to sleep. The next morning, on my way to check out, I passed the door again. I still couldn't believe what I saw the night before, so I decided to take another peek. So I knelt down and took another look inside. But this time, all I could see was red. Nothing but red. Did she notice me looking last night and cover the hole up with something? It was all very strange. I went to the concierge to check out and I decided to ask her, "So, what's up with that room? The one that's all boarded up?" "Well," she said, "a while ago, a family checked in. A mother, a father, and their young girl. But that poor girl never checked out. Her parents murdered her in that room. Oh, I'll never forget them. They had incredibly pale skin and deep blood red eyes." So this is a story that my aunt told me happened to her when she was in her mid-20s. She was living in the Philippines at the time and she had a niece who was a freshman in high school. So one day, the high school called her and said, "You need to get over here right now. Your niece is acting really weird." And my aunt had no idea what they were talking about. And so when she got to the school, her niece was sitting on a chair and she looked really out of it. And if anyone tried to touch her, she would violently hit their hand away and yell at them in a cold, deep voice that clearly wasn't hers. So they had no idea what to do. So they called the sheriff of the town to see if he had any ideas. And so the sheriff got there and it was pretty clear to him that she was probably possessed by something. And so he asked her, "What are you doing to this girl? Why are you here?"
"She hurt my children. She stepped on my house."
"Wait, how is that even possible? Where is your house?"
"Outside of the school."
So there's this Filipino superstition that you shouldn't step on ant hills or termite hills, basically any mound of dirt in the ground, because there's a creature that lives in them called the duende. Duendes are sort of similar to elves or goblins, and they're invisible to most people, but they do show themselves to children or some adults that they choose. They mostly just leave you alone, but if you mess with them, they can bring you a lot of bad luck and misfortune, and in the worst case, death. And right outside the school is filled with anthills. So unfortunately, my aunt's niece did not know about this rule. So the sheriff started pleading with this spirit inside the girl. "She's just a kid. I'm sure it was just an accident. What can we do so that you will forgive her and leave her alone?"
"Get bananas, oranges, and salt and bring it to my house."
So they went to the store and they got a bunch of fruit and salt and then they placed it all around the anthills that were outside of the school. And then when they went back inside the school, my aunt's niece was totally normal. Like she didn't even know what had happened. And she didn't remember speaking in any weird voice. She just thought that she fell asleep. My aunt is a super sane person. I have no reason to believe that she would ever lie to me about this. Something that makes this story a little weirder for me is that this is not the first story about a duende that family members have told me. So my mom's side of the family used to live in Hawaii when she was younger. When my uncle was 3 years old, one day he sort of just went missing for a few hours, and so everyone was looking for him. A few hours later, he just showed up at the front door and they're like, "Where did you go?" And he said, "Oh, I was playing with the little people." So my family is pretty convinced that the little people that he was playing with were duendes. So a few years ago, there was a pretty well-off family that lived in a really big house in Newport Beach, California. A mother, a father, and 2 small kids. And one night, the parents decided that they wanted a night out for themselves, so they hired a babysitter. She was maybe about 16 years old. So when the babysitter got there, the parents gave her a little rundown of what to do, and the mom pulled her aside and said, "Once you finish tucking the kids in, do you mind watching TV in our bedroom? The kids have been having nightmares lately and waking up screaming, and our room is right next to theirs, and so it's a lot easier to get to them." "Yeah, sure, I can do that." So the babysitter and the two small children waved goodbye to their parents. So after a few hours of watching TV, it was time for bed, and as she was tucking them in, one of the kids said,
"Please don't let the clown get us."
"Of course I'm not gonna let anything happen to you." So she turned off the lights and went next door to the parents' room like the mom had asked. But the second that she stepped inside, she froze. In the far corner of the room was a clown statue. Just a really lifelike, detailed, creepy ass statue. "No wonder these kids have been having nightmares," she thought to herself. So she went and sat on the bed and tried to watch some TV, but she kept looking over at the statue. Was the statue looking at me like that before? It was way too creepy for her, so she decided to go downstairs to the living room and watch TV there until the parents came back. So she's watching some TV for a while, and then her phone rings, and it's the parents just checking in.
Hey, we're on our way home. Just wanted to check in and see how things are going.
"Everything's great. The kids are all asleep and in bed. I hope it's okay, but I decided to watch TV downstairs instead. Your statue was really creeping me out."
I'm sorry, what statue?
"The clown statue in your room? It's really creepy, so I decided to leave the room."
Get the kids now.
"Wait, what?"
Get the kids and get out of the house now. We don't have a statue.
Just then, she heard screams. She dropped the phone and ran up the stairs. The bedroom seemed so much farther than it did before. She opened the door, but she was too late. So apparently there was a little person serial killer that would dress up as clowns and break into people's houses and murder people. So this story is 100% creepy and 100% true. So my aunt, my cousin, and her youngest sister, Genesis, who was maybe 3 at the time, were in their townhouse in Glendale. My aunt and my older cousin were talking outside of the master bedroom, and Genesis was playing inside of the room by herself. And out of nowhere, they hear Genesis start to scream. So my aunt and my cousin go inside the room to see what's wrong, and they see Genesis crying hysterically and grabbing books and toys and pillows and just throwing them in this one corner of the room. And they ask her, "Genesis, what's wrong?"
"Tell the little red girl I don't want to play with her."
So my aunt and my cousin grab Genesis and they get out of the house and they head to McDonald's to go get a Happy Meal so that they can calm her down. So when they got home, they remembered that Genesis made a huge mess in the room, so they went to go clean it up. But when they went inside the room, everything was already put away. We're leaving again, so they left the house again. So my aunt was telling her neighbor at the time about what had happened and what Genesis said she saw. And her neighbor told her that a little girl had actually died in that complex 15 years earlier. They moved out like 6 months later. I was maybe like 7 when my cousin told me that story, and I remember being like, yeah, I'm not visiting you guys ever again. I was actually talking to my cousin Genesis about this recently over the holidays, and she said that she actually used to play with that little girl a lot. So I guess that little girl like wasn't always scary to her. I guess maybe it was just that one time she just like didn't want to play with her. This is part of the reason why I don't want kids. Because if my kid started like talking to nobody, I'd be like, nope, I'm out.